Karbala had ended, but the mission of Karbala had only just begun. The battlefield was silent, the martyrs lay in the sand, and the blood of Imam Hussain still marked the desert of Karbala. Yazid believed that by killing Hussain, he had silenced the voice of truth forever. But what he did not know was that Allah had chosen a woman to carry this message forward, a woman whose words would shake the palaces of tyranny and echo through history until the end of time. That woman was Lady Zaynab. After the tragedy of Karbala, the surviving members of the family of the Prophet Muhammad were taken as prisoners. Women and children, exhausted, wounded, and grieving, were forced to travel from Karbala to Kufa and then to Damascus. Chains were placed around their necks, and the heads of the martyrs were carried on spears. This was not only physical captivity, but an attempt to humiliate the household of the Prophet in front of the world. Yazid wanted to present himself as the victorious ruler. He wanted the people to believe that Hussein had rebelled and been defeated. The grand court of Damascus was decorated, the elite of the empire were invited, and Yazid sat on his throne with arrogance and pride. He believed history would remember him as the winner. But Allah had planned something far greater. When the prisoners of Karbala were brought into the court, silence fell. The sight was heartbreaking. These were not criminals. These were the daughters and granddaughters of the Messenger of Allah. Among them stood Lady Zaynab, the daughter of Imam Ali, and Lady Fatima, the granddaughter of the Prophet. She had lost her brothers, her sons, her nephews, and her beloved Imam. Yet she stood tall, dignified, and fearless. Yazid began mocking the sacrifice of Imam Hussain. He recited poetry filled with arrogance and disbelief, believing he had avenged the battles of his ancestors. He struck the lips of Imam Hussein's blessed head with his cane, showing complete disrespect for the Prophet's family. The court watched, some in fear, some in confusion, and some in silent regret. At that moment, Lady Zaynab stood up. The same court that echoed with Yazid's arrogance now fell into complete silence. Her presence commanded respect. Despite chains, grief, and unimaginable loss, her voice was steady, powerful, and filled with divine strength. She did not speak as a defeated prisoner. She spoke as the daughter of Ali. Lady Zaynab began by praising Allah, reminding everyone that honor and disgrace come only from Him. She then turned her words directly toward Yazid. Without fear, she exposed the reality of his so-called victory. She reminded him that worldly power is temporary, and that Allah's justice is eternal. She told Yazid that he believed he had won because he saw the family of the Prophet in chains, but in reality, he had only exposed his own cruelty. She declared that martyrdom was honor, and oppression was humiliation. Hussein had achieved eternal success, while Yazid had earned everlasting shame. Her words struck the hearts of everyone present. She reminded Yazid that he could never erase the message of the Prophet. Even if he tried to silence the truth through violence, Allah would ensure that this sacrifice would be remembered forever. Lady Zaynab reminded the people of Damascus who Hussein truly was. She made them realize that the man Yazid had killed was the grandson of their prophet. Many in the court began to cry. Some realized they had been deceived by propaganda. Others felt deep shame for remaining silent. She warned Yazid that the day of judgment was approaching, a day when every oppressor would be held accountable. She told him that on that day, Hussein would stand as the winner, and Yazid would stand as the defeated. What made this sermon extraordinary was not just the words, but the courage behind them. Lady Zaynab had lost everything in Karbala, yet she did not ask for mercy, nor did she bow her head. Instead, she stood as the voice of Hussein, ensuring that his sacrifice would never be forgotten. Yazid, who had begun the gathering with pride, now sat humiliated. He attempted to justify his actions, but the damage was already done. The truth had been spoken. The illusion of victory had been shattered. This sermon transformed the court of Yazid into a court of judgment. The oppressed became the judges, and the ruler stood exposed. Lady Zaynab turned chains into symbols of honor, and turned a defeat into the greatest moral victory in Islamic history. The impact of this sermon did not end in Damascus. It spread across the Muslim world. People began questioning Yazid's rule. The narrative changed. Karbala was no longer a rebellion. It was a stand for justice. Hussein was no longer seen as defeated. He became the symbol of resistance against tyranny. Lady Zaynab proved that words, when spoken with truth and faith, are more powerful than swords. She showed that a believer does not need armies to defeat injustice. They need courage and unwavering trust in Allah. Her sermon ensured that Karbala would never be buried under political lies. It ensured that every generation would remember the sacrifice of Imam Hussain and the message he stood for. Even today, when we remember Karbala, we remember Zaynab. We remember how she stood in the most dangerous place, in front of the most powerful tyrant of her time, and spoke without fear. She is not just a historical figure. She is a role model for every believer who faces injustice. Her message teaches us that silence in the face of oppression is not an option. It teaches us that truth must be spoken, even when the cost is high. It teaches us that Allah's support is always with those who stand for justice. The sermon of Lady Zaynab reminds us that Karbala did not end on the day of Ashura. Karbala lives wherever truth stands against falsehood, wherever justice challenges tyranny, and wherever faith refuses to bow to oppression. Yazid's palace has turned to dust, but the words of Zaynab are still alive. Hussein was martyred, but his mission continues. This is the victory of Karbala. This is the power of truth. And this is why, even after centuries, we still say, Karbala lives on, and Zaynab made sure of it.